Hello, folks. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and this is the Secret Teachings of All Ages. And before we go any further, I invite you to like this video, share this video, and certainly I invite you to subscribe to this channel because we're really just starting to get cranked up now and move into deeper waters of revelation. And as we move into the secret teachings of all ages, we're moving out of just the now I lay me down to sleep, bedside Baptist, Sunday school, baby Christian world. And we're moving into the deeper thought and the revelation of the Christ outside of the scriptures. Now, I am the Christian whistleblower. That is my strong suit. That's my sweet spot, is talking about the biblical literature and showing people the absurdity. And on this channel, if you go down, you have the section about the false apostle Paul. You have a section about blood sacrifice and about blood sacrifice and saviors. You have a section about the book of Revelation, and you have a couple other sections down there about New Testament corruption. So we have the basic bases covered, and those are all extensive video collections, playlists as they're called here on YouTube. So we have a lot of the basics covered, and we'll continue to cover the basics. We continue on a weekly basis to look at the original teachings of the Christ, which is a chronological walk through the New Testament revelation. And we also continue to talk about the original teachings of the Christ, which is a chronological walk through the New Testament teachings of the Christ. So we are still staying very solidly in the Bible, explaining the Bible, expounding the Bible, showing you what's diamond, showing you what is dung. But we're also going to begin to expand our horizons outside of the shackles of exclusively biblical thought and looking at Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, looking at Madame Blavatsky's Isis Unveiled, things of this nature, helping us expand our horizons and begin to understand things from perspectives that the forces of big-time religion have intentionally held from us and kept from us for these 2,000 years. So buckle up as we get ready to take a look at the secret teachings of the Christ. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and here we go with the secret teachings of all ages. Okay, here we go, and we're in the secret teachings of all ages from Manly P. Hall. You can see the text there beside my lovely picture. And it's very interesting. Hall says here that the entire history of Christian and pagan Gnosticism is shrouded in the deepest mystery and obscurity. And it's important to note there is pagan and there is Christian Gnosticism. Pagan just meaning anything that is not based within the so-called Christian thought or within the context of the original Yeshua movement. And I've had some discussions with, I think his name is John Lash Lamb or John Lamb Lash, or he's a noted Gnostic theologian, I guess you would say. And he really took me to task privately, but he took me to task and was somewhat dismissive, I might add, about my assertions that the Apostle John wrote in very plainly and clearly Gnostic terms in his Gospels and in his letters, and even partially within the book of Revelation. John Lash Lamb, or I think it's Lash Lamb, he said that there's no way that ever happened, and I actually have, I think, proven quite clearly that John the Apostle talked about the organic light in the New Testament. And I would say that Lamb's contention would be that there is no Christian Gnosticism, but only pagan Gnosticism, as he really took me to task personally for saying or suggesting that there would be any such thing as Christian Gnosticism or Gnosticism talked about within the New Testament. And that's all right. John has the right to be wrong. But there is differing schools of Gnosticism, both Christian and pagan, at least according to Manly P. Hall, and with all due respect to Mr. Lamb, and including myself in this, Hall is certainly I think, a better judge and a better reference than either of us. And it's interesting because the Gnostics, as Hall points out here, were prolific writers. But none of their writing survived, very little of it. And we've talked about this at length over the past 4 or 5 years that I've been doing this channel. And the reason why the Gnostic thought, and especially the Christian Gnostic thought, the reason why that it has not survived is because their literature was intentionally destroyed. And as Hall very adroitly points out, they brought down upon themselves the animosity of the early Christian church. And when this institution reached its position of world power, it destroyed all available records of the Gnostic cultus, or the Gnostic school of thought. Now, it's important to realize that the Christian church is not synonymous with the movement of the Christ and the original Yeshua movement. In fact, they were antagonistic. The Christian church would be the Pauline church, the Roman institution, as opposed to the work of the early Yeshua movement. And they brought upon themselves, no doubt, the animosity of the early Pauline / Roman / Neronian church. However, I believe that the Apostle John shows, and we've talked about this in the final message of the last apostle, my book, that there was no animosity between the Gnostics and the original Yeshua movement. In fact, many people have asserted that they were at times almost indistinguishable, and I would have a hard time arguing against that, but especially from our discovery a couple days ago, and a lot of times these things are discoveries for me as well, that the Christ really talked about having a mystery school and talked about initiatory rites and things of that nature, or at least alluded to them. But the Gnostic thought was destroyed by the Roman church. And we've talked about this before, but when you think about the destruction of Jerusalem, a very unusual act for the Romans, because they normally did not destroy, raze, and burn everything to the ground, because they were very pragmatic. They wanted to be able to use the facilities in the conquered countries, especially when you're talking about a facility and a structure as impressive as the temple at Jerusalem. They didn't want to destroy that thing. They were forced to destroy it. Many people believe because the last of the defenders held out in the temple, which is probably true, but that still doesn't mean they had to destroy it. It's my belief, and I think that we've shown it to be a very well thought belief over these past years, that one of the reasons for the deconstruction of the temple brick by brick, one of the reasons for even plowing the place where it stood, was in order to root out, find, and destroy every shred of teaching of the original Yeshua movement, the original movement of the Christ. They wanted that stuff gone, dead, and buried, because they know that it was a threat to the Christian church if people understood the Gnostic thought of the early Yeshua movement. And if it weren't for things like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and even more importantly, the Nag Hammadi Scriptures, which we also do a teaching upon, we would not have known of the Gnostics. We would not have known of the truth of the teachings of Yeshua. And people always say to me, oh, the Bible, you're leaving the Bible. It's only the Bible, 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 the Bible. Let me ask you this, genius. If you believe only the Bible, the Bible, the Bible, the Bible, the Bible, John made a statement in the Bible that says, if all the deeds of the Christ were written down, there would not be enough books in the world to contain them. Now that's in the Bible that you say is the book for me. You stand alone on the Word of God, the Bible. Well, John said that if we wrote down all the stuff that Jesus taught and preached, all the stuff that he was about, all the stuff that the Christ was about, all the stuff that Yeshua was about, all the books in the world couldn't contain it. But you want to sit there and tell me, and sit there and accuse me, and sit there and call me a devil, and call me the Antichrist, and say I'm going to hell, because I have the audacity to say that one book could not contain all the wisdom of the Christ. Quite frankly, I don't give a damn what you say. I'll stand with John, and you can hit the road, Jack or Jill. I don't give a damn if you say that I'm an idiot because I go beyond the Bible. Because John said you're an idiot if you don't. Thinking that all of the teachings of the Christ could be contained within the one volume that we call the Bible is the peak of ignorant stupidity. You couldn't be any dumber. And it's willful, and it's intentional, which makes it even worse. So the early Christian Roman Pauline Church destroyed all of the Gnostic materials it could get its hands on. And if you start looking at the very simple fact that the word Gnostic just means wisdom or knowledge, and it comes from the Greek word gnosis. So it's not paganism, it's not devilish, it's just Gnostic, it's just wisdom, it's just knowledge. But the problem that the Pauline Church has is that they think they are the possessors of all wisdom. They are the possessors of all knowledge. And there is no knowledge outside their little, now I lay me down to sleep, pay me, act right or I'm going to send you to hell religion. No truth outside of their one book. No truth outside of their one little order. Of course, it's broken up into so many pieces and fighting factions that you can't even shake a stick at them. But yet, they contain all knowledge. Come on, man. John, the one that the Christ loved the most, said, don't be stupid. You can't contain all his wisdom in one book. That's why we're looking, even though we look very thoroughly at that book, we also look outside into parabiblical. Biblical, of course, meaning the Bible. Parabiblical, meaning outside the Bible. Now, Gnostic means wisdom. It means knowledge. The members of the order claim to be familiar with the secret doctrines of early Christianity. And again, Mr. Lamb takes me to task for saying this, but frankly, I'll stand with Hall and against Lamb any day of the week. But the early Gnostics were familiar with the secret doctrines of the early Yeshua movement, and the members of the early Yeshua movement were familiar with the secret doctrines of the Gnostics. And that the reason why I know that is because John talked about things in his Gospels that were Gnostic initiate secrets. Only people that were Gnostic initiates knew the things that John, some of the things that John talked about within the New Testament. That's why I've made the assertion, and make it here again today, that either the Apostle John was a Gnostic initiate, or Yeshua the Christ himself was a Gnostic initiate and taught these things to John. And they interpreted, it says, the mysteries according to pagan symbolism. They interpreted the Christian mysteries according to pagan symbolism. They incorporated the message of the Christ according to pagan symbolism. Why? Because a lot of it was based on pagan symbolism. Pagan just means, well, it literally means like hillbilly, country dweller. But in this context, it means, pagan means anything out of step with the dominant religious idea of any particular locality. So when you're talking about paganism, you're talking about anything that was outside of the school of Pauline, Roman, Neronian Christianity. And the Gnostics interpreted the teachings of the Christ according to pagan symbolism, because do you think there's any secret why you can find teachings of the Christ in India? You can find teachings of the Christ in the Far East. You can find teachings of the Christ in the American Indians. You can find teachings of the Christ in the Pacific Islander religions. You can find teachings of the Christ in the Nordic religions. You can find teachings of the Christ even in all religions, even in Islam. Why? Because the Christ probably was a manifested avatar in all of those other religions too, and he brought to us at the end of his work, he said, I have brought to you all the ways, the truths, and the life. And that means not I brought you Christianity, it's the only way, but it means I've brought you the best of all the ways. I brought you the best of all the truths that lead to life. And by following these things, we are able to come back into the Father, to come back into life. So when the Gnostics were interpreting these things according to pagan symbolism, they were doing simply what the Christ would have them to do, and even, you would say, what the Christ taught them to do. And their secret information hall says, were concealed from the profane and taught only to a small group of especially initiated persons. And that, dovetails with what we talked about earlier this week about the parables and the jars. You got to go back and watch this stuff because it all ties together. And the most amazing thing is that it's not even intentional that it ties together. So we're going to stop there today. Let's go ahead and wrap this up as we turn our mind from the actual text of the secret teachings of all ages. And let's just wrap it up here for a second. All right, folks, just back to kind of wrap up today's discussion. It is the height of ignorant ludicrosity to think that the only place that we can find information about the Christ is from what is known as the Christian Bible. We've seen that that's a document that's at least 75% dung. Does have some, the reason why we keep studying it is because the 25% of it that's diamond is amazing, and we do need to keep studying the Christian scriptures. Not the Christian scriptures, but the scriptures of the Christ, and you know what I mean. John said that there's all of the books of if you were going to write down everything about the Christ, that all the books of the world couldn't contain it. But yet, these silly, foolish, stupid, arrogant, mean, nasty, controlling Christians want us to believe it's the only book that you can actually learn anything from about the Christ. Baloney. And that's why we're looking at the secret teachings of all the ages. And today, Hall let us in on, to some of you, a secret that the Gnostics understood Christian thought or early Yeshua movement thought, and the early Yeshua movement understood Gnostic thought, and many times the two overlapped. And they were based on pagan teachings, meaning teachings outside of the Nero-Pauline religion. And that's good. If you look at all of the great religions of the world, you're going to see themes, teachings, and ideas that were brought to us by the Christ. And he consolidated all of those great teachings into one concise path to enlightenment. And that's what we're here to talk about. And that's what we mean when we talk about unindoctrinating yourself. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, share this video, and whenever you do, continue to come back, because we're here to help you unindoctrinate yourself.